You're listening to Children of the Watch. I'm Mac Lacey.
And I'm Alex Maxwell, and today we are breaking down the first episode of Skeleton Crew. If you're new to our podcast, we break down every single episode of Star Wars television, scene by scene, to analyze the story, find comb for Easter eggs, and explain how it all connects to the larger Star Wars universe. And Mac, I love this show.
Yes, so we are breaking down the first episode of Skeleton Crew. We got the dual episode premiere last night. So we're about to break down and talk about everything in the first episode, and then you can expect a breakdown of the second episode later today. We're making it just a podcasting extravaganza. But that's
all for you.
That's the kind of mood that this show's got me in, you know?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on board for Skeleton Crew. It's pretty much exactly what I thought it was going to be tonally, but it was totally unexpected how much I was going to enjoy that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense because I think I'm in the exact same boat as you are, matey. Yeah, it's vibes wise, it's just off the charts. In terms of, I am so into this show in a way that I did not expect. I knew I was going to like it because I typically end up liking every Star Wars thing. That's just kind of my personality. But I love this show. And I think what makes this show so great is that it captures the heart of Star Wars really, really well. It just...
Yeah.
Gets what makes Star Wars so special in a TV format, and that's been hard to do, as we've seen, and I think they do it very, very well.
For sure. There's a lot of risks involved with a show like this, especially with the suburban environment and everything like that. That's a risk. That's not a typical Star Wars thing we think of, but I think it's such a cool thing that they're doing with the setting and the production design and everything like that of the show, because these kids are basically the audience, right?
Yes.
When we're watching A New Hope and we're watching Luke gaze out at the binary sunset and he's dreaming of more than the little farm he's lived on all of his life. He's dreaming of adventure. He wants to be, important. He wants to help people. He wants to do all these things. But And when we, the audience, can all immediately relate to that, right? And latch onto that. This show is just taking that. It's taking the connection one step closer to reality, if that makes sense. The everyman nature of these kids' struggles is just that much more apparent, with some of the settings being closer to real life. So I've really enjoyed that so far. I was. That's a risk. I didn't know how that was gonna play as being in a Star Wars show, but I think it's going fantastically.
Yeah, because these four kids are truly outsiders, right? They're closer to what most of our audience, what me and you have experienced, than even Luke Skywalker in terms of they really have no idea about the wider galaxy. Of course, Wim knows about Jedi and Sith. He knows all the stories and stuff, but he's never actually seen it. And we're going to be talking about all of that and what the barrier is. And I've got some theories I'm going to be sharing on this breakdown. Of course, we're going to be talking about Captain Silvo and Jude Law's character, all that. But they're really, really close to what we experience with Star Wars. And so that makes it makes it easier to put yourself in their shoes, probably more than any other Star Wars character, because they're so close to what we experience all the time. But I think what's going to make this show successful, Mac, is the fact that you don't really need any knowledge of Star Wars to enjoy this show. And
absolutely.
I've been seeing a lot. Yeah.
More so than any other property that's come out, I think. Even The Mandalorian's pretty close to being a good fresh start. It's pretty self-contained in the way it starts, but then it branches out into all kinds of stuff that you need to have knowledge of.
Right.
The Clone Wars and all kinds of things like that.
Mandalorians. Yeah. So I totally agree. But like I just put like a quick message out on Instagram of like loved it, and I got this message back, and I think this is going to be true for a lot of people listening. And you know, it might be part like of your story too. Like if you've just found us to listen to a recap and see how it all connects to the larger Star Wars universe, this might be your story too. But I got this message. I loved it, but more importantly, my wife loved it. There's nothing better than my wife asking what is happening and getting to respond, I have no idea, and getting to experience it together for the first time. And I think that's what's going to put this show over the top, just like based on the reaction of the first 2 episodes. Yeah. I really think Disney's got a hit on their hands, and I cannot wait for this journey going forward for the rest of the episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to see where it goes. Of course, we've seen the first 2, but we're covering just the first episode.
Yes.
On this one, again, check your feeds later today for covering the second episode. We're gonna be just keeping it coming. But yeah, I'm pumped to see where it goes. I don't know. It's something special when he was saying that like it's something that both brand new fans and lifelong fans we're invested because we don't know.
Right.
And it's, I think the mystery they're setting up is one that's enticing to people who don't have any idea. I mean, you hear of a lost planet that nobody knows about with mythological treasure and stuff like that. You're like, okay, cool.
Sure.
But it's also something that has all these little Easter eggs and connections for the lifelong fans who like. It's even more. I think we might even be more confused. Our curiosity might be greater because of the little breadcrumbs they've been dropping of all these little Easter eggs and connections and things to the Old Republic or whatever it is. And I'm so invested in the little mystery box they're setting up,
I 100% agree, but we want to hear from you guys because the way that we do the show is we do our scene-by-scene breakdown, which we're about to get to in just a second, but then we also hear from you, the listener, and we want to hear what you thought about these 2 episodes. What are your thoughts? And then what are your theories? Because we love hearing theories and speculating, and we want to hear what you have to think about this show. So call into our Skelephone Hotline, 205-259-6675. That's 205-259-6675. Keep it under 3 minutes. If you mess up, hang up, try again. We will use your best one. We want you to call in and try to call in early this time because we're super eager to record that voicemail episode. So we do this breakdown. Later in the week, you'll get a voicemail episode with your thoughts and theories on the show. And then if you're a Patreon member, you get another voicemail hotline episode as well. That's patreon.com/The Mandalorian Watch. For just $2 a month, you can get access to those episodes. And the fun continues on social media. Follow us at COT Watch on X, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram. And if you're watching Dune Prophecy, check out our friends at Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. I know they would appreciate you joining them for that show. A lot of fun over there. But Mac, I think we should get into the breakdown. What do you think?
I don't see any sense in waiting any longer.
All right, so episode 1 is titled "This Could Be a Real Adventure," and I'm loving the way.
I think they're right. I think it could end up being a real adventure.
Totally got it. And I love these episode titles too, by the way. Like, these are really great episode titles. The caption for the episode says, "Kids from an ordinary planet discover a surprising secret." And then the director, of course, is John Watts. And I want to say before we jump into the breakdown, you could feel that this was a seasoned director directing this episode. It just felt like movie quality, pacing, acting, performance, all of it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. On the, we'll get into it further, but just up top, like one comment on the directing. There are so many choices made in how to like transition from scene to scene or which actions to cut. Like there's so many times where the kids will say something and then we just cut to it's whatever they were talking about has already happened.
Yeah.
We're seeing the aftermath, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that takes confidence as a filmmaker to do, to know where you can get away with, like, the audience doesn't need to see every bit of the process. Like, they understand what's going on, what's happening. So I think like you said, seasoned director and very trusting of the audience to be able to take the ride, you know?
And I love that. So, as with every Star Wars TV show, we begin with our sequence of red and blue flashing helmets. And with some new additions this time, we get Captain Silvo, the safety droid's Anakin in his pod racer helmet, and it ends with SM-33. For 5 years, we've been trying to find meaning in these helmets, and there's no meaning in terms of the light red and blue.
No.
It just, unless there is, it just is what it is.
Unless we've just really been bad at our detective work. Let us know if you know of some secret pattern that it's indicating.
Yeah, it's Morse code. I don't know. So we fade into a starry background of space as blue text slowly fades in. And Mac, I love openings like this. It's a mix between Solo and Ahsoka. It's keeping the tradition of Star Wars alive, and I almost kind of wish that The Mandalorian Season 1 had started off very similar.
I mean, I do think for clarity it could have helped, but
yes,
it's hard to beat that opening. Too.
I know,
I understand why you go for the snappy choice. But yeah, I love that we get just a little bit of context. It's not a whole crawl. It's not too distracting or anything like that. But yeah, it just lets us know when this is happening, what the struggles are around the galaxy, and it seems like the struggles are pirates.
It does seem that way. And like you said, I think it helps you realize when it takes place. And if you're kind of confused, okay, where exactly does this take place? This is taking place after season 3 of The Mandalorian. We know that because one of the pirates from Mandalorian season 3 is present in this show with a new captain. So that lets you know this is happening after season 3 of The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian takes place about 6 to 7 years now after Return of the Jedi. So that's where we're at in terms of how close is it to the original trilogy. So let's read the text and let's siphon some information from it. It says, since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order, and yet remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. These pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as sign to all ships, surrender or die.
Yeah, love that. I mean, that's what the Jolly Roger has, is supposed to represent. Is like when they raise the Jolly Roger, you're supposed to, all right, it's going down. We got to make a choice. We gotta make a plan. I love that. I love that. We're focusing on remote hyperspace routes. This is not necessarily stuff that's happening like in the core of the galaxy. Like this is not a problem for Chandrilla or like Hosnian Prime, the two New Republic capital planets and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's something that is regularly an issue if you're out on the Outer Rim.
Well, and I think it has an impact on what's going to happen in The Force Awakens and then later in the Mandoverse area of Star Wars, in terms of like the Outer Rim is increasingly getting more and more dangerous, maybe even more so than when the Empire was in charge, right? Because everyone was afraid of the Empire. Now, like, people feel like they can kind of push their boundaries a little bit, see how far they can get away with things. And I think we saw that in season 3 of The Mandalorian. Yep. And then, we're seeing it in this show. I think it will create a space in which it kind of starts to make sense why people might, hey, the First Order is not that bad. Yeah. They're here to clean up the Outer Rim and get things in order. Kind of starts to make a little bit more sense there.
Yeah, I think it's been frustrating for us as Star Wars fans with the lack of background information on the First Order and like just how they came to power, what power exactly they even have in the galaxy is kind of unclear and that kind of thing. But we have to remember that like when A New Hope came out, we didn't have the prequels to tell us how the Empire got here. And I think the story we're in right now with the Mandoverse is going to pave the way for the foundation of the sequel trilogy in a big way, like the prequel trilogy did for the original trilogy.
Absolutely.
So like I think, I'm good with give me the background on how people are getting disillusioned with the New Republic. How the First Order is gaining some sympathy. People maybe being like, remember when we were under the Empire? I don't think we had as many pirate troubles then.
Yep. Right.
So I think that's valuable information. I'm liking that we're getting some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The background information we've been waiting for since like 2015. So
exactly, almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But like from the opening, I knew I would like be in love with this show, and then we had the little opening scene, and I somehow fell even more in love with it. So our view descends to a single planet as debris tumbles into view, and it's followed by a battle-damaged, blocky freighter, intentionally reminding us of the Tantive 4 from A New Hope. Just a really great opening here.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to evoke, I think, the opening of A New Hope, but just in a different way. There's a lot of
all the way to the end of the scene.
Right, the shots continue to like the way that they breach the door and all that kind of stuff. But it's also completely fresh and different, right? Because like we're not seeing rebellion troops. We're seeing these random freighter crew fighting off this horde of pirates, and that's such an interesting dynamic we haven't really gotten to see a lot of, I don't think.
I'm going to say something that's never been said before. I just coined it as you were talking. I think this is going to be a really kind of cool term or phrase. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
That's so smart. It's like...
Thank you.
Wow. You should...
it's deep.
You should classify that into some kind of theory, like about rings.
I'm going to... Okay. Maybe a square. A massive shadow overtakes the freighter, and suddenly 3 drills pierce the hull, and it's been harpooned by a massive ship. This was so cool to see. It looked great. Inside, the crew takes up positions as they prepare to be boarded. Again, all reminiscent of A New Hope. Mm-hmm. And the crew keep their weapons trained on the sealed hatches as the pirates run through the drills. And as soon as the first hatch opens, good luck to any pirate in the front.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, just absolutely murdered.
You think it's always the new guy who's like first through the door. It's like, all right.
If you make it,
then that's how you like actually earn your place in the crew kind of deal.
Exactly. I think it's that.
I love all the nautical parallels for... Like, they're like, okay, how do we do a pirate attack, but in space, right?
Yeah.
So instead of the, like, harpoon lines that people would, like, climb across to get to the next ship, you've got these big drill passageway things, and, I don't know, I just love I've been obsessed with the, like, naval comparison made for space stuff in Star
really
Wars
have.
from a super young age. So this is really doing it for me.
Yeah. It's awesome. So the next wave makes it inside, and an Ishitib pirate takes a direct hit in his eye stalk, but stays on his feet, killing the crewman who shot him. I mean, that guy, don't mess with him.
And like, we don't often get to see how pirates get their eye patches, so it's fun to see that like in real time happen,
Exactly.
I do have questions about how he's going to wear an eye patch, but...
Maybe he gets a cybernetic eye. Yeah. I don't know. Outside, one of the freighters, turbo lasers takes out a boarding tube, but almost immediately after, a few pirates in spacesuits shoot out towards it on grappling lines, planting a few charges to take it out. I thought that was really cool. Again, it looks great. The production of this show, I continue to be very impressed with. Now, they had an extra year to do this in terms of making it look great, but man, they did their job. They made this look really well. That's been one of the gripes for some of the Star Wars shows of like, and I have no gripes about that on this show. Everything looked really great to me, including this scene.
So for me, there's a few CGI shots that just look a little bit, like I'll say
TV.
overbaked almost. Like they just, it just really looks CGI-y. But for the most part, it's fantastic. And even those moments don't take me out of anything. It's just like, oh, okay, maybe, and they actually are doing, I think, more CGI than it appears to. Yeah. They're relying on practicals pretty heavily, but I think it may surprise you to learn how much of what you're looking at is CGI.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a good job blending those elements, I think. Yeah. Inside, more and more pirates overpower the crew. They start giving up as our Wolfman pirate, Brutus, comes marching in, wielding 2 blasters. I kind of got the sense, Mac, and maybe you can correct me, he's kind of like our Barbossa for this story, I think.
Yeah, no corrections needed. That's exactly my thought. There are a lot of parallels to Pirates of the Caribbean, actually. I think the Disney of it is coming into play a little bit. Yeah. There is some, especially later, there's some references, I think, to some different like Pirates of the Caribbean things.
Yeah.
Yep. The keys is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't think that comparison is misplaced at all. I definitely think he's a Barbossa character. He's like the first mate who has ambitions of, being the captain.
But that might also kind of give us an indication of him as a character, because I don't think he's completely bad. There's some clues in this scene even that I don't think he's a completely bad character like someone from the Empire might be, right? Like we typically see.
And we're dealing with pirates who are morally complex characters in terms of their allegiances, alignments. Like, they're certainly not heroes, but they're not the space Nazis that we're used to being villains either, right? So there's more humanity to them, in my opinion, than like the Empire. But it's it ain't no rebellion, ain't no New Republic.
That's right. So he calls behind him, Captain Silvo, the ship is yours. Now, obviously, Captain Silvo equals Captain Silver, right? Yeah. Like Long John Silver of Treasure Island.
Yeah, we've been making the Treasure Island comparisons already. They're also going to continue, I think. And maybe even at this point, you're like, it seems like they're really playing into their references, like into their inspiration really heavily. But that's Star Wars, baby.
Exactly. That's what makes it great.
Yeah, that's what George Lucas did heavily. You just space up stuff that you like in the real world, or from other media properties, from anywhere really.
Exactly.
And I think they're doing the same thing, and that's a big contributing factor to it feeling so Star Wars, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Silvo comes in with Gunther on one side. That's Jamil White of Family Matters. You probably know him best from that. And a woman on the other. And Mac, I need Silvo's helmet. I need it on the shelf right now. What a great look he has. I mean, he looks great.
Yeah.
But
it's good. He's got like I almost compare it to like Bouche or Bausch from Return of the Jedi, that kind of helmet shape, but it's classy looking.
It's so good. It's sleek. It's a great look with the brown trench coat, the gun belt. It looks great. But this is totally Jude Law, right? Like, that's Captain Silvo is Jod. Right, that's what I'm guessing. Yeah,
I mean, you can see we've recently made a big deal about the shirt he's wearing. He's wearing the same shirt,
unless it's a red herring.
Costume. We could be completely wrong, but I think the voice, like the lilt to his voice, checks out for Jude Law. I think it's Jod.
And we discussed on our very last episode before we did this breakdown, instead of Occam's razor, we discussed Mac's vibroblade, which is the most Star Wars thing that can happen, will happen, and that's the most Star Wars thing.
A disguise is about as Star Wars as it gets,
Exactly.
Galaxy's Edge should just sell the glasses with the big nose and mustache attached. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Because that's about as Star Wars of merchandise as you need.
I think we should go to Galaxy's Edge and punch out the workers and steal their clothes. That's more Star Wars, right?
Yeah, we should be pirates.
I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Silva wants to be taken to the vault, and we cut to a scene of Silva throwing the freighter's captain down, warning him not to lose his life with the ship. But the captain claims immunity under the New Republic decree, and the captain claims that this is not a credit shipment, they're a bulk freighter. And then we get this line, if this is a bulk freighter, why is your vault magnetically sealed? And again, it's paralleling Darth Vader questioning at the beginning of A New Hope. It's almost phrased exactly the same way. Yep. And again, the captain is adamant that they're protected by the New Republic and orders all the pirates off the ship. They laugh and point at him, ha ha ha, yeah, and then Silva punches him. And then Silva orders to throw him out the airlock. And Silva hints that the crew has been questioning him lately, giving up on him, but things are about to be all better because of cold, hard credits. And this is kind of where, he kind of feels like Jack Sparrow in that sense of like losing the Black Pearl. Like we never saw that scene, but I can imagine it went a lot like this.
Yeah, or like there were several raids before he was actually mutinied that went similarly to this, you know? You can tell like they've had a string of bad luck. He's been making bad calls about what targets they're hitting and things like that. The crew has not been seeing the rewards that they're, maybe accustomed to seeing. So they're like, maybe the captain's the issue. It makes sense to me. But I love that he's kind of a, whatever he's going to end up being in this show, I'll put it that way. Like whether he's a hero or a villain or something in between, we're seeing him in the making, like right off the bat. We're seeing how he gets to the character he's going to be the rest of the show. And I think that's a wonderful way to enter.
Absolutely. But pirates, they love credits. We all know this, and it's the only thing that matters. But the problem is when they open the vault, there's only one credit inside, and Brutus enters, retrieves it, and it kind of reminded me of that scene from The Dark Knight where the money's gone except one like stack of bills. Do you think this was a setup, Mac?
It could definitely be something like that. It could be some, Rangers of the New Republic making a bust kind of deal.
What I was thinking, yeah.
It could also just be that like Silvo ain't got it. He's just not very good. So
right, kind of like Jack Sparrow,
right?
In that sense, yeah. So Brutus turns back to Silvo. Good men's lives lost for a single measly credit. Things just got worse for Silvo. All the pirates aim their weapons at him, and it's a full-on mutiny. Silvo tries to fight his way free as Brutus sneers at the credit, and we cut to black. Title credits, skeleton crew, and again, from that whole opening sequence, I knew I'm going to be so on board with this show. And then we get what we get on At-Attin, which I think they did such a good job that a lot of Star Wars shows don't take the opportunity to set the foundation before they start the adventure. And they did such a good job of setting that foundation and making us care about the characters before they actually go on the adventure. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was what kind of honestly sold the show for me. Like the opening was great. I loved it, but it's the performances from these kids that make me so in love with this show because they do such a good job.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I love, especially for Wim and Fern, the storylines that they kind of establish that are the core conflicts in those kids' lives. I think we understand immediately from this little opening, not from the opening credits, but from how we open on At-Attin. And that's, I agree with you. A lot of Star Wars shows want to just get to the action, get to the pew 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 pew. But if we look at the pacing of A New Hope, we have the big cold open of the Tantive 4 being boarded and everything like that. But then it is just Luke hanging out on Tatooine for a long time. But that's important because from that we gained that, okay, Luke is like kind of a small town kid who is dreaming of bigger, better things. He's got this father whose legacy is looming over him, he thinks, and like wants to live up to that. And, you know, all of his kids are already leaving for the Imperial Academy. That's how they're getting off the world. We know all of this stuff, right, about Luke without it having to be said in so many words, you know? And we get exactly that information for these kids. And it's a wonderful foundation to lay.
It's awesome. So we open up back to rippled dunes of bed sheets as Wim plays with Sith and Jedi figurines. They look a little old, Mac, a little weathered, as if like they've been around for a while.
They might have been passed down a couple times, you know. Who knows?
I don't know.
It's not going to be the only anachronism that there is to find.
Great word.
Yeah.
Good vocab.
Had to get the 5-cent word out at 6:11 in the morning.
Exactly. Wim says, "You'll spend eternity in my dungeons being tortured until you die, and it wouldn't be a Children of the Watch breakdown without me asking, is there anything to that line? Are we coming back to find a Jedi having been tortured in some dungeon on At-Attin? Is that going to be a thing?"
I think probably more likely is we're going to get whatever story Wim is constantly reading on his data pad. I think we'll get that story in some form eventually, right? Maybe an animated short of like, this is what Wim has been watching the whole time, or and so I think that might be a plot point from one of those. Like that might be a specific plot point from a story that we'll get in the future. Certainly ripe for the pickings in terms of like you could make children's books or whatever you need to out of that pretty easily, I would think.
Oh, for sure. Wim continues to play with the toys, and Wendell, Wim's dad, calls for him. He's going to be late for school, and as he gets his cereal and blue milk ready, we see his Jedi and Sith toys along with a fake lightsaber on the counter. And then we get the typical 80s dad background speech. He's working a lot.
I have heard this exact, just 80s dad. If you put that into AI, you get this, this speech, I think.
100%. Yeah, and he gives him some credits for lunch, and you get the sense that Wendell has kind of lost himself in his work, right? Yep. No sign of mom, so he's single parenting. Wim's head is up in the clouds, though, so like there's a disconnect between Wendell and Wim that has probably been growing for a while. We can probably guess that this is something that they kind of routinely do every day, right? Like he tells him, "I'm going to be working late. Here's what you need. Don't forget this." And Wim is just totally checked out, dreaming about something else. I think that's kind of the typical thing that probably goes on at that house. And after he leaves, Wim exits out of his home into the suburbia that is At-Attin, and jumping over a lawnmower droid and avoiding a frog dog being walked by an Ithorian whose name is Mrs. Ick.
I love that. I loved all of the Ithorians we got to see. Yeah. We got to see an Ithorian child later. It's all good. Love the Ithorians. Love that they're back.
We love Ithorians.
When was the last Ithorian we got?
Book of Boba Fett, probably?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. The mayor of Mos Espa. Yeah. So you notice that the speeders all have to follow a path on the road. Did you see that? Like there's like little lines that the speeders have to follow. And I think that's kind of symbolic for this society, right? Yeah. Like you cannot go off path. Like you're getting in a car and you think you've got control, but you're being guided everywhere. And I think that's what's going on this planet. Like we discussed even before the episode came out, we were speculating that something's going on this planet. I think that's very obvious with the barrier and the safety droids and all that. Like they're keeping people on the planet and safe and happy and as if you don't need anything. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I'm seeing signs of that all over, especially when we compare it to other like relatively stable Star Wars societies we've seen, right? They're usually characterized by like individualism, self-determination, like that kind of stuff. Whereas this seems very much like there is a predetermined path that each, like, you are each a cog in this machine, and
Exactly.
like your purpose has been preordained.
Yes.
Which, you know,
For the
it's-
greght work. For the great work.
Yep. When I heard that terminology come up, I was like, "Oh, huh, haven't heard
We'll get to that.
before. Interesting."
So waiting for Wim is Neil. He slowly turns and they both ignite their fake lightsabers, which I think we've all done before, circling
course.
each other and then acting out a duel. And I just got to say, the music is absolutely great by Mick Giacchino, who is Michael Giacchino's son, who did the Rogue One score, very famous composer. He did Spider-Man. His dad did Spider-Man and stuff. And his son is great. Like the music for this show has been such a highlight for me. I think they do a really, really good job, especially during this scene. But Mac, while they were pretend fighting as Jedi, I couldn't help but think, how cool would it be if eventually, like, they become Padawans to Ezra or something like that? Like, that would be so cool.
That would be really, really cool. You know, I don't know what's in the cards as far as that goes. Star Wars has continued to oscillate on the can anybody be a Jedi, or can only certain people be a Jedi? They haven't really made a firm stance on that yet. So I think if the former becomes true, then I would, you know, I could see Wim and Neil in the new Jedi Academy.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
we'll see.
Yeah, so they have to stop playing because Neil gets an eyelash stuck in his eye, and Wim is trying to look for it for him, and a group of girls watch them and end up embarrassing them. We later see them on a speeder tram, kind of like a bus, and it's just I love everything about this.
Yeah, absolutely. They nailed what it's like to be a kid. Like, all the kids act like kids, which is something that gets lost in, like, child acting, I think, sometimes. Like, I think when you have so many, like, child actors, it's commonly they can all, like, okay, we have to be actors. So they start acting more adult, like, because they're trying to emulate the craft side of things of what they're doing, right? But these kids are just being kids, and that comes through for me in an authentic way, and I think that's important.
Absolutely. And I love that there's an RX droid just trying to do his best to get these dang kids to school. And how do they repay him? Just by sticking gum on the back of his head constantly?
Yeah.
Poor droid.
I loved that detail. If you're not familiar with RX droids, like Rex, who used to fly Star Tours, is an RX droid. Oga's Cantina has an RX droid that DJs now. So there's it's a long legacy, particularly for, like, Disney parks and stuff like that. You know, Star Wars in the Disney parks. So I'd love to see him here, and love to see, you know, that he's getting pretty much the exact treatment of Earth bus drivers.
I also think that, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know we got to keep going with the breakdown, but the RX droid is kind of a clue in terms of, like, maybe how long they've been isolated, right? Because I don't think this society would come up with an RX droid exactly like all the other RX droids out in the galaxy. So that might kind of give us an indicator of how long they've been trapped there. Maybe not as long as we were speculating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. That's a valuable clue. I think RX droids, like, are pretty firmly planted in the original trilogy timeline, just because of their, like, appearance in Star Tours.
Maybe prequels. Maybe you could argue prequels, but I don't know.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Either they haven't been isolated for as long as we suspect, or they have some kind of contact with the outside world too.
That's a good point. Yeah,
ongoing contact that we just don't know about yet.
Yeah, that's good. I love how real the bus feels inside with all the kids. There's even a milk crate with, like, an alien creature trapped under it. Neil's talking up homework, the basic table of 7 and 9, which comes out a lot throughout the episode. They end up talking about it later again. I don't know if that's going to come into play at all, like later in the series, because they made such an emphasis on it. So I don't know.
Like it comes up multiple times. We see characters doing these math, and I don't know exactly what the operation being performed is, but whatever these math problems are, we see characters doing them throughout the episode. So, I would not be surprised if it comes up again.
Yeah, and of course, Wim's not paying attention. He has a story pad in his lap reading about lightsaber duels. And if you notice, the story pad is like really old. You see an image of a Jedi with a blue lightsaber fighting a Sith with a red saber in a cave. And then there's a whole Arabesh paragraph under it that I didn't have time to translate, but follow us on social media at COT Watch, because I'm sure someone has translated it or is in the process of translating it. And of course, we'll bring that to you on the voicemail hotline as well whenever that does get translated, because there were several of those, and that will probably give us some clues about what's going on At-Attin. Outside his window, he sees Fern and KB on a hoverbike go off the path into the forest, but no one saw but him. And then we get a good view of At-Attin, and they stop at school, and a safety droid forces them to school, and they're everywhere, always watching. That's kind of another indicator that they're being kept there. And Wim even sees one lecturing Fern and KB.
Yep. Yeah. There's certainly it's giving me 1984 feeling. It's like these people are prisoners in their own home. Is the best feeling I can kind of put into words.
Class, and this droid is going on in a monotone voice about something we do to get like our first mention of the barrier. The droid mentions the barrier for the very first time, and Wim isn't paying attention. He's using his desk as an Etch-a-Sketch, and then Undersecretary Farah passes by, catching him. Yeah. And she goes up to address the class, and she reminds the class of the career assessment test happening the next day. And clearly Wim has forgotten, and she says that by taking it, you'll become part of our planet At-Attin's contribution to the great work. So that begs the question, Mac, what is the great work?
That is a great question. We've never heard it phrased in that manner before, unless I'm mistaken, unless I'm overlooking it somewhere. That's not like a common Republic saying or anything. No, I've
never heard it. Yeah.
So like it sounds almost like Maoist to me. Not that I think that this society is like Maoist or anything like that, but I just mean that level of like authoritarian control. I think talking about the great work and like in things like that in those terms is a great way to inspire people to look past some stuff, if that makes sense. Right. I don't know. It's a great question. I think we'll probably learn that, it's a commitment to their society in the residents of At-Attin's minds, but it's ultimately going to mean something probably more sinister, I would imagine, by the time the season's over.
It's also giving like the Giver vibes too, with this society in terms of the career path, all that, like you're talking about with the great work. And I think I think you're spot on about this for sure. And then she goes on to say, keeping the Republic peaceful and strong. And then there's a really funny moment with Neil as he watches his love interest, Runa, longingly. I really liked that part. It's pretty good. Everything with Neil is great. He's going to be a fan favorite, I think.
I would kill for Neil. I would do war crimes if that's what was required to keep him safe and happy and fulfilled.
Absolutely. She then asks Wim what he wants to do, and he says he wants to help people, but she kind of reminds him that's what safety droids are for. And then we cut to outside as Neil is scolding Wim about forgetting about the assessment. And Neil offers to fail with him so they can stay together. Again, just kind of a great friend there.
Yeah.
I love that.
Like willing. He's like, oh well, I can just fail, and like he's willing to torpedo his life for his friend. It's not even a thing to him. He's not even. It's mentioned nonchalantly. I love Neil.
Exactly. I do too. Then he admits that he likes Runa despite never talking to her. Wim defends himself, wishing he could do something exciting, but Neil can't even think about like what could be exciting, right? Like he's so in this world that At-Attin has built for him, probably like most citizens. He just can't like even fathom. What do you mean exciting? Like I don't. What are you even talking about here?
Right.
Because he's comfortable, right? Like we even see his home life. He is comfortable. He has a great life. So like, why would he need to do anything exciting?
Right. I mean, that's how the real world
exactly
works. I think the people who are, not to get too lofty or anything like that, but like I think people who are, born into situations that are better they're going to be more satisfied and fulfilled with the system,
right
because they got a better starting point in it,
right.
I think that's how real life works as well. I think people that have maybe things that are outside the norm tends to make you look for something else, maybe, and that can cause some disillusionment, with this kind of bill of goods that's being sold, I'll say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
yeah, so we cut to a fun sequence of Fern and KB zipping and zooming through traffic, kind of giving you an idea about Fern's character, right? We kind of get to know her through this, but her hover bike smokes and shuts down. And then we go back to Neil and Wim, and Neil goes into his home, and he's greeted by his just absolutely incredible family. We've got Mom and Dad. We've got Jorko and Jobo.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, how can you forget little baby Tulo?
You can't.
We're huge fans of little baby Tulo here.
Yeah,
on
real admirers of Tulo's work. Yeah, I loved seeing Neil's family. It reminded me of the holiday special a lot with Chewbacca's family, with Lumpy and everybody. And then I think that's also evoked by the holo table entertainment they're watching. If I'm
that's
not mistaken.
From that, yeah.
So
same scene that Lumpy's watching.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I like that.
Yeah. So Wim watches and sighs, trudging back to an empty home. So that also kind of gives you an indication about Wim. Like, he doesn't have what Neil has. And then in another neighborhood, KB works on the hover bike, but the power converter is corroded. And Fern mentions that the scrapyard's been picked over. So also kind of another clue there of like, okay, there's not much there in terms of like picking through, like, and that might be on purpose, right? Like they might be cleaning those things up on purpose.
Right. Most scrap yards are going to have a constant influx of, new scrap and stuff. So it's something that people can keep scavenging, keep picking over. That implies to me that like there's not, new ships are not being made. Like new ships are not arriving and needing to be scrapped or anything like that. Like it's just kind of further speaking to that isolation.
Yeah, and then Bonji Falfa stops and taunts them about an upcoming race before speeding off. We hate that guy.
Yeah,
sucks.
We're bitter enemies. Falfa.
Fern says that you have to act tough with those type of people. It's the only way to deal with them, and then we'll continue to see her expound on that in episode 2, like in a big way.
Yeah. I love Fern.
Yeah,
I think she's the perfect headstrong. I'm gonna put her in the archetype of pastor's kid, if that makes sense.
That's 100%
or
what she is.
Politician's kid, because she is the chairwoman's daughter or whatever like that. I can't remember her official title, but
undersecretary.
Something menacing like that. But yeah, so she's being raised by these people who are so prominent in society and like so like buttoned up and probably like looked to as these examples of how to be and stuff. So she has to go the complete other way and be as rebellious as possible. She's got to kind of prove that like she has worth to herself, like outside of, who her family is and everything.
Yeah. I love kind of her story, because it's not exactly what you thought it was with her, right? Like she is not Han Solo, but she wants to be. Right. That's kind of like what she's yearning for on the inside. But she's got this really buttoned up life that she's trying to maintain too, and trying to have both, right? And I think, like you said, with pastor kids or politician kids, like there's that acting out a lot of times because they have to be so buttoned up around at home. That's they're kind of putting on that face for their parents. So anytime they get away, they kind of yearn for that freedom a little more. And like you said, that's really relatable with Fern. And I love how we watch her transform from biker to student as she enters her home. And before we talk about her and Farah in that scene, let's talk about that mural on her wall. I tried to see if there were any clues on it, because of course I did. And I didn't see much. I really examined, but the guy sitting on the right, I'm not going to lie, looks a lot like the animated version of Anakin Skywalker from the Clone Wars, but with his back turned.
Okay.
I don't know if that's anything, but I don't know.
Yeah, but we had to look. That's what we do here.
Of course we had to look. Yeah. Fern convinces her droid that she's been home studying all along, and then we get the sense from her mom, Undersecretary Farah, that she is really hard on Fern. Yeah. Has to be on top of her class, unaware of her life as a biker.
Right. She's not
you really get that.
There's not just the pressure to be a good student. Like, she fell from the number 1 spot for a brief moment, and that was like considered a trespass. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, like even if you're doing good, that's fine. It's no, you have to be the best. So like that's pressure. That's also this weird dynamic set up by her parents between her and her peers. Like there's this weird competition that's being forced on her almost with everyone around her. And I wonder if that's maybe part of why she seems to mostly keep to herself other than like KB. Like it's just like her and KB all the time, I think.
Yeah, maybe people hate her, right?
Yeah.
Because like she's getting the top spot, her mom is, all that. So there might be a little bit of that too going on. At Wim's house, his dad comes in on him studying. He gets the basic table of 5 wrong. Again, we get the basic table of whatever, before having to go to bed. And he asks his dad to read him a story like his mom used to, but Wendell says he can't. He has to work. And then he says this line that just like pierced my heart when I was watching it. He said, bedtime stories, aren't you getting a little bit old for that? And just oof.
Yeah, like my guy, it's not about the story. Like the kid misses his mom. You know, like he just like wants this moment of connection with you and like remembering his mom and stuff like that. But like instead, that's the reception he gets, and it breaks my heart, honestly.
Yeah, that was a rough moment for me, and I think by the end of the show, there's going to be a little bit of a redemption for Wendell. I'm guessing.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, like he's also falling into that classic trope of like he's not a bad guy either. He has pressures on him, and just like everybody else, it's just that like he's letting that overshadow his other like responsibilities, like to his son and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So I want him to get a shot at being a good dad. It may be a Marlin from Finding Nemo situation. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Wendell maybe leaves to go find his son, kind of deal. Because he's the only parent that we see who knows firsthand what's going on. Like he's the only person who sees the kids leave at the end.
Right. That's actually a good. This is kind of maybe a Finding Nemo thing. Yeah. That's a good pull there. So the lights go out, and Wim Of course, he can't sleep. That was kind of like me, not last night, but the night before, because I was so excited for Skeleton Crew.
Oh, I couldn't sleep last night. I overslept our recording wake up because I could not get to sleep. I was just like laying in bed like, oh, It was so cool.
It was so good. And so he flips through his favorite Jedi stories on his story pad, and there's a couple highlights here. We see one Jedi in some kind of forest. Kind of reminded me of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, where you see the person walking across. There was something about the image that evoked that in terms of walking across the thing in Indiana Jones. And then there's more Arabesh under it. Again, that's going to be important when we get that translated. And we also see another panel of a tree trunk with an axe buried in it. And maybe it's a King Arthur type story, but it's an axe.
And an axe in the trunk instead of sword in the throne. Sword in the throne. Sword in the minestrone. I think a bowl of soup would be easier to pull a sword out of. Anyway.
Well, I mean, there's one version of King Arthur where it's the lady in the lake who hands him the
it's all the same version. Two different swords. Excalibur is not the sword in the stone. That's a big misconception. Excalibur is the one that the lady in the lake gives him, not the one he pulls out of the stone. I think maybe some like the Disney adaptation may have made them the same or something like that. But in the original legend, two different swords.
That's interesting. Then we get a green lightsaber wielding Jedi facing down a big monster. And like you said, I think these are all going to come back into play later in the series. We might actually see them doing these great feats themselves at these very same sites.
Yeah, in some fashion. Like it may not be them with lightsabers and stuff like that, but some. It almost seems like the Herculean trials. Like there's like these 13 trials they're going to have to face that are all kind of being foretold in this data pad.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. So Wim looks out the window. There's a swirling nebula above them. And I didn't catch this on the first watch. I saw it only on the second watch. But there aren't stars. They can't see any stars. But there's all these red dots all over the sky. And I think this confirms that they're being kept there by the barrier, capital B there. The barrier was created, I think.
I agree. I think it's like I've theorized there's some kind of Truman Show situation going on where these people are unaware of the actual limitations of the environment they live in and stuff like that. It's certainly seeming that that's the case. I'm so curious about the barrier, and I don't know that we're going to get any more information on it for a while, which is a little frustrating, but it's also good. I mean, they're keeping us on the line,
Yeah, we might have to wait till January for answers on the barrier. But then we cut to Neil yelling as Wim runs behind the tram. He's not on it. He overslept. We acted out this same exact scene starting the podcast this morning.
Pretty much. Yeah. I was Wim. You were like, "Come on, you can make it." This was an example of like. I think it shows confidence in the direction and everything to just cut to Wim running after the tram. He doesn't have to wake up and we see the tram leaving his outside and like that. Like, no, we get it. We understand just by this one shot. Let's get to the meat. Let's tell the story. And I really appreciate that in the direction.
And even though this wasn't the Spider-Man that John Watts directed, it reminded me of the very first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, that scene where he misses the bus. Like there's that trope there that is present in this episode. So he's got to take a shortcut, and he gets on his hover bike and he's trying to go the same shortcut that Fern did the day before. And so he rides through the forest. Meanwhile, the assessment is taking place. Neil is getting nervous, and he's trying to delay it a little bit. And Wim continues to ride through the forest, and he comes to a ravine and tries to stop, but he tumbles all the way down to the bottom. I thought it was going to be a little bit larger. I thought he was going to die or something, but it's not as big as we thought when we first see it.
I thought that was like an intentional gag. Like that, like it was almost like, it seemed like a bottomless ravine, and then it's, 30 feet or whatever.
Right.
It got a little chuckle out of me.
Yeah. So he's lost in the forest and he's got mud all over him, and he tries to get out, but a bat-like bird flies out, and he tries to get up the side of the slope, but he struggles until he accidentally pulls out a tree root. And then when he looks up, he sees the outline of a metal hatch.
Yeah.
And he starts to dig at it a little bit, and then he's caught by a safety droid, and he's trying to cover up the hatch, and he asks how to get out of there. And it seems like the safety droid has no care for what he's doing.
Yeah.
And we get back to the school as the safety droid just watches him in a school hallway, and Wim waits, cycling through more Jedi stories. And we actually see one panel, Mac, that I think absolutely looks like a Zepho temple to me.
Yes, I totally agree. It looked exactly like Fallen Order, like some of the way the carvings are and like the doors and stuff like that. I saw that as well. And if you want to know more about the Zepho, you can check out our Star Wars mythology, legends, lore, and pirate tales episodes. I'm so glad we did those, by the way.
Me too.
They are seeming so pertinent to what the show is. It was a great way to set the stage.
Absolutely. And then we see a Jedi with either a white saber or blue, and more Jedi on the temple steps with their sabers in front of a circular looking door. And I think that's what makes Wim kind of think, okay, that's a circle. I found a circle out in the woods. It must be the same thing.
Yeah.
And Fern settles into a seat next to Wim. They share commonality over their bikes, and Wim comments that it's totally Wizard. Again, that may give us some indication about At-Attin and how long they've been there, because that seems to be a term from the prequels. So I'm thinking maybe it got isolated either before or during the Clone Wars is my guess right now.
It could also just be a thing that's something that kids say, and we just don't focus on many kids outside of that era, you know?
Right.
So it could just be like child terminology instead of era specific.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Or totally radical, dude.
Yeah.
Like that's that's like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't draw too much from it, but this is a pretty good scene because Fern tells this very elaborate lie about the proctors making kids work in the mines. And I think this is really good writing because it kind of sets up the type of kid she is and how it's going to come in handy for her later. Like, she's really good at lying, and that's gonna come in a big way in episode 2. And we'll talk about that in our breakdown for that later today. But the door slides open, and he's thinking it's going to be the proctor, but it's Wim's dad. Wendell worked it out with the proctor to retake the test the next day, but he's going to have to pass it. Like, he can't get anything wrong on it.
Yeah. He has to get every single answer correct, and we've seen that he's been struggling with his basic tables of whatever. Yeah.
Wim tries to tell his dad about the Jedi temple he found, but his dad doesn't want to hear it because he has to, of course, work. But of course, Fern overhears all of this, and she asks him about it as Wendell leaves. And Wim says he was just lying. And there's really good chemistry between them in terms of there's this rivalry budding between them. But I think that they're going to become good friends as the show goes on. I think it's a really good foundation for these two characters.
Yeah, absolutely. You see different qualities of leadership in both of them, right? That are starting to develop. Like Wim has this vision almost, I'll say. Like he's imaginative, he's creative, and that's inspiring, and he can get other people involved in sold on the vision. And then Fern, it shows leadership in that she's able to kind of she's able to manipulate people basically. which will to varying
going to come in handy
is a leadership skill, not to be used for evil, but sometimes you have to be able to work with people,
and she probably got that from her mom, who does the same thing on it, probably in some sort of way, right? She's playing a role probably as this undersecretary to keep everyone safe, happy, and comfortable on At-Attin, so nobody wants to leave. And so she probably picked that up from her mom. We cut to Jorko and Jobo watching the same scene from the holiday special on their holo as their mom brings them some snacks. I love this. Wim gets baby Tulo's attention, asking where Neil is. And then we see our dude Neil just living the luxurious life in a giant bubble bath. Like, he's got it made.
Neil's got a great home life. Like, everything's rad for him. And I'm sure that's really hard for Wim, you know?
Exactly.
Because, like, his home life is so bleak to him. And that's, you know, it's sad. The juxtaposition of that is well done, though.
And I love that, too, because it kind of gives you a character arc for Neil of, like, he's kind of like Bilbo Baggins in that sense of, like, he's got all the comforts of life and he's got a great life, but there is something missing from him that he doesn't realize yet, right? Like that sense of adventure. He has no idea. So there's kind of a parallel there, I think. Yeah.
Whereas Wim is Frodo. He's been hearing all the stories his whole life and he's begging to get out, you know?
Exactly.
I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So Wim convinces Neil to get his dad's tools from the garage. And I love the blue elephant picture on the wall as they're going through the tools. Like, it's just all these little details in the background, I think, are just so rich and make it feel so real, because, like, we've all been in our friend's garage and seen like their parents' stuff everywhere too. Like, it's just really, really cool. So they head out to the forest and assign comm signs as they're going. They decide on Jedi 1 and Jedi 2. Just great music here too. Just the whole feel of this. We've all done this as kids where, you know, we're pretending like we're something we're not.
Of course,
You know, and they get to the ravine and Neil is having second thoughts as Wim unfurls the electrical cord rope, and he tells Neil to hold the rope. And Mac, I laughed out loud in this scene. I don't laugh out loud a lot in funny things, but I absolutely did here. Just a great scene as Wim pulls too hard and they just both tumble to the bottom of the ravine. Just great stuff.
Yeah, classic physical comedy, good gag. I mean, they're capturing that kind of classic coming of age 80s comedy feel to me.
Yes,
a lot of the ravine based jokes actually have made me feel that way.
Ravines are so hot right now.
New shirt coming soon. Like, we probably need to take that off of our merch store, because I feel like at this juncture it has lost all context. I think we're so far out.
That's what makes it so great and neat. So they get back up and they notice the hatch has been messed with, and then they hear an electronic voice, but it's just KB messing with them. Neil immediately admits to having a crush on Runa. He falls for it, and that's kind of another great gag as the episode goes along. Like, Neil's just immediately doing whatever the girls ask him to do without hesitation, and I love it. Like, he's just like fully in on their side. It's great.
It's like, everybody laughs now, but in 10 years, when everybody's looking to partner up, they'll remember. They'll remember Neil.
Exactly. Neil's a ladies' man. So KB and Fern steps into view, and they confront the boys. They're going to strip this thing for parts, and Mac, she called unclaimsies and then claimed it. And she says, fine, and then immediately calls unclaimsies, and Neil has to admit it was a good move.
It perfectly encapsulates, like, playground etiquette, the rules of engagement for all of those kind of things, you know? Like, I think every kid grew up with some kind of version of this, whether it was, like, finders keepers or dibs or whatever it was. So I don't know. Yeah, again, it's just perfectly capturing what it's like to be a kid interacting with other kids.
Mine was always like, who got the front seat in the car whenever you're riding somewhere.
Shotgun.
That was the big one for me.
Yep.
So after she claims it, she then bans the boys from it, and Fern says that they can work for her, and he immediately agrees. And and Fern then says that it's not a Jedi temple, but instead it was a freak accident in a sewer system that turned workers into zombies. Again, we get an elaborate lie here, really for no reason, just to like mess with Wim.
Just to stir the pot. Like she just gets an enjoyment out of stirring the pot this way, I think is all there is to it, you know?
Yeah. And after scaring them, she convinces them to do all the work for them. But if they open it, they get to look inside, and Fern agrees. And after dark, Wendell gets home by being guided by the power rail and then finds Wim is gone. And at the ravine, Wim and Neil dig. Wim has an idea to reclaim, claims he's on the inside while calling the girls dumb. I love that. Meanwhile, Fern thinks the boys are so dumb and hopes there's a power converter inside. Mm-hmm. And then KB notices something from the loose dirt. And they head over, and KB examines it from her Cyclops thing. And she pulls something into the panel, like attaches to her cybernetic, whatever that is. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I need some more information on that. I don't know if it's like a full Lobot scenario where it's like integrated in her brain, or if it's something that, you know, it's just like an accessory she wears. I'm not sure, but it kind of plays the part of like OSHA's pip droid, in my opinion. It's like it's kind of a personal computer that's always on you.
And it's really cool.
Yeah.
I like the vibes that she's giving. So yeah, she kind of attaches herself to the panel, and it powers it up, and it opens the hatch. And cautiously they approach, and a little mouse scurries across the ground, and faintly you can hear Wendell calling out for Wim in the background. So the kids rush to gather all their things and jump inside the open hatch, and they're all poking their heads back out, realizing it's Wim's dad. And for the kids, the stakes are raised, right? Like it might not be galactic stakes, but we all have been there of like, oh, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to get in trouble. And
when you're a kid, those stakes are galactic. That's your whole life. They could get put on hold for an indefinite amount of time, you know? So like those are some life or death stakes when you're that young.
Absolutely. So they all agree he's going to get in so much trouble, but it only hardens Wim's resolve. And so he goes further into the ship, and later he screams that there's a skeleton inside, and we find SM-33 sitting slumped with his hand on a power switch, and it's dead. Now, it makes you really wonder, and there's some more clues in episode 2, Mac. Mm-hmm. What happened on this ship for it to turn over completely? SM-33, like his hand on the hatch, really makes you start to question what happened here.
Yeah. I think it's pretty apparent that the reason the ship is dormant is because I think SM-33 like pulled some kind of kill switch type deal, right? Just like put the ship into this hibernation state as like a last ditch effort to, you know, preserve something.
Yeah.
The ship, lives, who knows?
I'm curious to see what it is.
Yeah.
So Wim is about to pull the lever when Fern stops him, but Neil gets a closer look, and a rat jumps out at Neil, causing him to jostle SM-33 and accidentally pull the lever. So the hatch door shuts, and they're locked inside, and KB realizes the door's not going to open without power, so they decide to follow the conduit to restore power to the ship. And Wim, still thinking that's a Jedi temple, says that there has to be another way out because Jedi temples have all sorts of secret passageways. Of course, he's getting this from his stories that he's been reading.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that Wim is having a really good time exploring. And he says this really interesting line. He says, "Did you know that some Jedi temples could lower down and bury themselves in times of danger?" And that reminded me a lot of the Lothal Temple from Star Wars Rebels.
Absolutely. You know, Lothal, the temple there is a big deal, kind of one of the central, you know, points of Rebels, like the thing that everything revolves around. It was also like buried and hidden for a long time,
Yeah.
right? So like it's really interesting to me that Wim has this knowledge. I guess maybe word could have spread about the Lothal Temple, during the time of the Empire, but it seems like this is like more academic knowledge that Wim is receiving, and that makes me question, like, would that knowledge be available to everybody past a certain year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like that's something ancient Jedi temples did, and it's not something like, Jedi, the prequels maybe necessarily had.
No,
but they knew about. They just didn't do.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Again, that might be another clue in terms of like, how long have they been on At-Attin? So the kids have a little disagreement, and KB knows that the conduit goes down, but Wim says they should go up, and he gets upset when Neil goes with the girls. Again, he's just kind of like, Neil's siding with the girls on this one. And eventually KB finds it while Neil is stuck in the hatchway. He can't get down because he's a little tubby. And KB hits the ship alive with power, and it flickers throughout the ship. And Wim stands in an upside-down cockpit as the ship comes to life, and even a headset falls loose.
Yep.
And he decides to put on the headset, and he uses his walkie-talkie to call Neil. But then Fern takes the walkie-talkie, and she orders him not to touch anything. But Wim can't help himself, and he presses a flashing green button, and the ship roars to life, and the kids have to rush to find each other, and they race towards the hatch, opening it as SM33 comes back to life, but they don't notice it.
Yep.
And so they're trying to get outside the ship, and they stop at the rim as the hatch of the ship rises from the ravine. And I thought this sequence was great, Mac. I thought it was really, really cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really impressed upon you, like, the sense of, like, danger and excitement and, like, surprise that's happening with a ship that you didn't even know you were in starting to take off, right? It's a great way to, like, mark the start of this adventure,
Yeah.
It's like, this is the moment that everything changes, so...
Yeah, and it's all because Wim made the choice to like touch the button, right? Like he like, makes a conscious choice to do that.
Who amongst us would not touch the button? That thing was begging to be pressed,
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, in the forest, Wendell stares in shock as the ground literally rises up in front of him, and the kids climb to the hole, realizing it's a starship. And Wim calls to his dad, but the ship starts to flip over, and the kids make it inside except for Wim, and they hold on to him as the ship completes its rotation. They get him inside, and the hatch slams shut, and the ship rockets towards the atmosphere as Wendell just watches on, completely helpless. On board, they race into the cockpit, and Neil realizes they're going through the barrier, and they try finding anything that will stop them and get them off autopilot. And they push all sorts of controls and stuff. And then suddenly the ship stops shaking, and they see the stars in space. And here's what's interesting. They have no idea what they are. They've never seen stars before.
That's a huge deal. Because like you, I didn't catch the... like not being able to see stars earlier when you're on the planet, so that was like, they've really been isolated, like they're living under a dome sort of thing. It's crazy. And just the idea of the barrier, like,
I wonder how far it extends. Is it just around the planet, or is it around like in the system? Like, it's not really clear. I think it's just around the planet.
Right, and it's like something they're all aware of. So like, what do they think the purpose of the barrier is? Do they just think it's just there, or like, I've got a lot of questions. I've got a lot of questions.
I've got a theory that I'm just now forming, and I'm going to share right now. What if the citizens of At-Attin put up the barrier when they realized the Republic had transitioned into the Empire. They didn't let the citizens know. They think they're still operating under the old Republic system, having no idea about the new Republic, and they just were isolated completely for 20 years or 27 years now from the Empire's influence.
I think that'd be a super interesting idea. They do like mention the New Republic in name on At-Attin, but we also got to remember that the Old Republic and the Republic that we see in the prequels are two different things.
Yes.
So they could be referring to the Republic of the prequels just as the New Republic, you know?
Right.
So there's all kinds of ways that could work. I think that's super interesting. Because that's almost a less sinister possibility than anything we've kind of been passing around. You know, we like, oh no, they're isolated to keep them safe from the Empire. That's an interesting spin on it.
Well, you know, and it's totally possible maybe they put up the barrier during the Clone Wars so the Separatists wouldn't find the treasure of this planet, which we learn, you know, that's the myth of this planet in episode 2, which we're going to be talking about in great detail when we do our scene-by-scene breakdown for episode 2 coming later today. So, again, make sure you're subscribed on your podcast app of choice and on YouTube so you don't miss that discussion, because I think we're going to actually get more like theories coming out of episode 2, because this one was really foundational. It kind of lets you know what the stakes are, who the characters are, and then I think all the theories and all the lore is going to be coming in episode 2. So you want to make sure you're tuned in for that, for sure.
Let's
close out
agree.
This.
Let's
close out what happens here. Yeah, go ahead.
We've got connection issues. Apologies, listeners, if that's a problem.
Yeah.
But so I was just gonna say, like, this being foundational, it sets the stage perfectly. We get to know all the characters, the setting, the time period, what the emotional stakes are, and then the plot comes next episode. I feel like that's when like we get our first little bit of actual plot at the end with the ship taking off.
Yes.
And, you know, but like, so the stage is set and then we are full bore in the adventure. Great way to start it out.
It's awesome. So as they get into space, they realize, like, when theorizes that maybe all of these are different planets. Fern says, no, I think they're stars. Again, they'd never seen any of this before. Yeah. And then the ship just jumps into hyperspace as they all scream, and we see the ship jump, and then we cut to end credits. And I thought it was just a perfect ending to cap off a great opening episode. I am so fully invested in this show based off that first episode.
Oh yeah, I was fully on board. I am desperate to know, like, what happens to these kids, and I don't even just mean in like the next episode. I mean, like, I need to know 20 years down the line that they're living fulfilled lives and they're living comfortably, and like that's the level of investment I have for the characters. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. I cannot wait to talk about episode 2 with you very shortly. We're going to do that later today. So yeah, stay subscribed. We're just going to keep talking Skeleton Crew today. But yeah, what a fantastic first episode. We also want to hear all of your thoughts on this episode, and of course the next episode. We're going to be doing our, Skelephone Hotline episode sometime later this week. But if you want to call in, get your theories on the show, 205-259-6675 is the number at which you can do that. Keep it under 3 minutes, but just let us know what you thought, what you think is coming, anything we missed. That's the kind of stuff we love to get on the Skelephone. Absolutely. I cannot wait to talk about episode 2 with you, and I want you guys in on the fun. So again, make sure you're subscribed so you do not miss that episode. But we hope that you guys had as much fun talking about this episode as we did. This was so great. We're going to do it again in just a few hours, and that will be on your feed today. Yeah. Cool. Well, we will see you then, very shortly. But until then, keep the watch.